What's up, guys? Zombie Rommel here. I hope you're having a great day. I'm very excited today, and the reason for that is that the EA Sports UFC 3 Real Player Motion Tech Striking Deep Dive has just dropped on all of us. The game changers, including myself, we've known about this deep dive for the past 2 weeks. Geoff Harrower, the lead gameplay engineer who wrote this thing, let us set our eyes upon it for about 2 weeks, during which time we gave our feedback about what he could polish up, what he can make a little bit clearer, and finally, we don't have to sit on this thing like it's some, top secret message set to explode. You guys can all read it, we can all discuss it, and that's a relief, I think, for every one of us, for the developers and for the game changers. So, without further ado, if you'll allow me, I'm going to go through this whole thing, like point by point, kind of read it, give my thoughts on each of the points. This is going to be long. I know some people like TLDRs. I'm not a TLDR kind of guy. I like to go in deep, which is part of the reason I'm stoked that this thing is so enormous. I'll give you a quick, just to give you a quick synopsis here. It's really long. But if you're the kind of guy who likes depth over breadth, then you're going to enjoy this thing. So, as I mentioned, this was written by Geoff Harrower. He's the lead gameplay engineer of EA Sports UFC 3. He's overseeing the striking system in this game. In UFC 2, you may have noticed that the ground game changed a whole lot, and that's because Geoff, he oversaw that aspect of the game in UFC 2, but he didn't have a lot of hands-on time with the striking. In EA Sports UFC 3, Geoff has his hands on the striking, and a lot has changed because of it. Just to give you a little bit of background on the man himself, if you don't know him, I've met him in person multiple times now. He's a really cool guy, very logical, has an engineering mind, and he applies a sense of cause and effect. That's not the right way to put it. He applies a sense of logic to all of his decisions. Like, if he's going to implement something into the game, it has to make sense, and he thinks about it in all of its various facets before he will, implement it. And that's a really good thing, because the striking in this game, in this series, needed some logic. It needed some coherence. And we are finally going to have that. So, without further ado, let's dive into this thing. He says, "Hi, my name is Geoff Harrower. I'm the lead gameplay engineer of EA Sports UFC 3. As you may have heard, the stand-up game for EA Sports UFC 3 has been completely overhauled and rebuilt from the ground up using the all-new Real Player Motion tech. I wanted to take this opportunity to do a complete breakdown on what that actually means for gameplay heading into the beta beginning..." That needs another N. November 27th. So this is really cool because, like, RPM is a cool buzzword. It kind of sounds like something that belongs in a sports car, RPM, Real Player Motion. But now we are finally going to have a bit of background, and we're going to get a better sense of the essence of this technology. So he says, "My hope is that with a better understanding of the underlying systems, you'll be able to hit the ground running and be in a better position to provide much needed and valuable feedback." He says, "In this blog post, I'll be covering the following major in-game systems, which have all been completely rebuilt in UFC 3. The damage system, the stamina system, combinations, stopping power and frame advantage, range management, and defense." He says, so we have a lot to cover. Yes, we do. So let's dive right into it. Damage system. The damage system in EA Sports UFC 3 is completely different from its predecessors. Strikes will now deal considerably more damage, and the actions that you perform carry a very real risk due to the new vulnerability system. In order to survive and best your opponent, it is important to understand how the damage system works. As in past games, there are 3 damage regions you can target in an attempt to hurt your opponent: the head, the body, and the legs. So that doesn't change, but a little bit about this does change, which we'll get into later. Each of these damage regions have unique properties which distinguish them from the others, and understanding each is vital in strategizing your attacks. Let me begin with the core set of rules shared by all 3 damage regions, providing you with a baseline to build your strategy. You will see a damage meter show up for each of these regions. If you manage to land enough damage to fully drain one of these meters, you will cause your opponent to be knocked down. How much damage you inflict on that final blow relative to how much health your opponent has left will determine how severe the knockdown is. So let's go over this last paragraph one more time. We'll read it one more time. You will see a damage meter show for each of these regions. If you manage to land enough damage to fully drain one of these meters, you will cause your opponent to be knocked down. How much damage you inflict on that final blow relative to how much health your opponent has left will determine how severe the knockdown is. This is huge. Like, for those of you who have played UFC 1 and UFC 2, you'll know that a lot of times the health events didn't make any sense. You could be completely putting a beat down on your opponent, and then suddenly he lands a tiny hook when you're at full stamina, and maybe he has half stamina, but he has a good dice roll. Maybe he has a perk that gives him like plus 15% chance to rock you. All these background RNG elements are going on in those games that allow for weird things to happen when they probably shouldn't. What this last paragraph makes very clear is that there is now a structure and a coherence to what happens in the game in terms of damage. So if if you're at a certain threshold of damage and your opponent does something to you, that will not only determine whether or not you get knocked down, but it will determine how severe the knockdown is. So there's a clear linear path of logic here. Hey, you were in this position and this happened to you, right? So this is the result. So he says there are 4 levels of knockdowns. Number 1, the act of knockdown. The least severe knockdown is the act of knockdown, which is new to UFC 3. This is where your opponent gets stunned enough to lose balance and fall, but is able to quickly and automatically recover and get back to their feet. So here's a picture of that. And by the way, Geoff took all of these screenshots himself. If you'll notice, they're almost always relevant to what he's talking about. Well, not almost. They're always relevant to what he's talking about. So that is not a coincidence. And you actually see this knockdown in one of the trailers. Some of the more keen-eyed viewers did catch that. And yeah, this actually is a brand new feature. Number 2 is the alert knockdown. The next level of severity is the alert knockdown. This is where your opponent falls to the ground but recovers their defense upon landing and is put in an immediate defensive position. If you attack someone in this state, you will enter the guard and start fighting on the ground. So we've all seen this before. You knock someone, they fall into the defensive guard position, like so, with their feet at the ready to kick your legs if you get too close. Nothing new here, but it is another state of knockdown to keep in mind. The next level of severity is the knockdown. This is a state where your opponent does not recover as they hit the ground and are left in a vulnerable position until they do. If you attack your opponent in this state, you will have an opportunity to finish the fight in a dominant ground and pound position, either by throwing strikes or by attempting one of the new finish the fight submissions. If your opponent manages to survive a knockdown from this state, you are still left in a dominant ground position from which to work. So, something to keep in mind here. New finish the fight submissions. I wonder what those could be. The knockout. The most severe state is the knockout. If you manage to knock someone out, the fight is over. Obviously. Like I said before, the total damage you inflict on the final blow leading to a knockdown, relative to how much health your opponent has left, will determine how severe the knockdown is. So the question is, how much damage do you need to inflict to cause each type of knockdown? Oh, good question. Well, the amount is varied based on your fighter's chin, a new concept that has been added to EA Sports UFC 3. So it's important to read all of this carefully because I have a feeling that a lot of players are going to confuse chin for like head health. Now, obviously, like head health was a thing in the past games, but these concepts are new, okay? And they're a little subtle, so you have to pay close attention to really understand what Geoff is doing with these mechanics. So the chin. Behind the scenes, there is a new meter that represents your fighter's chin. Every time you are stunned, rocked, or knocked down, your chin meter depletes. As your chin goes down, the amount of damage to reach each of the levels of severity for the knockdown reduces. Basically, the more times you are rocked or knocked down, the less damage it will take to knock you out the next time your health goes below 0. Depleting your chin and reducing health to 0 will cause a knockout, regardless of how much damage that final blow carries. So, this is a mechanic with a hidden meter that is only diminished, not with damage, but with health events, with stuns, rock states, knockdowns. So each consecutive time, you can take less and less punishment, like throughout the fight, right? So what you have with this chin mechanic is a very straightforward and logical mechanic to how fights are ended. It says depleting your chin and reducing health to 0 will cause a knockout, regardless of how much damage that final blow carries. So understand this. In UFC 2, you kind of had to damage spike your opponent in order to finish them. And usually that was achieved by throwing a combo, building up the combo multiplier, and therefore getting a lot of damage into a short period of time. And what Geoff is saying here is that as long as you're consistently damaging your opponent throughout the fight, let's say you get like 2 or 3 knockdowns in round 1, then you get another knockdown in round 2. By that third round, the guy is going to be easier to finish, and you're not going to have to throw some crazy like 10-hit Tekken combo to put him away. Like what you do prior in the fight is going to carry forward in a very straightforward and consistent manner. Next, we have the stun meter. Another new concept in EA Sports UFC 3, the stun meter. This meter is hidden from the player and represents the short-term damage or stun value inflicted by a strike. It's the depletion of this meter that changes the severity of the knockdown. When you land a strike, the stun meter for that region immediately fills to match the damage inflicted by the strike. However, it drains very quickly. Once the stun value reaches a threshold, you will rock your opponent, and their health will no longer regenerate. They will start to throw ineffective strikes, and their movement will be hampered. It's the perfect time to move in and finish your opponent. High stun values can be achieved in one of 2 ways. Either by landing multiple strikes in quick succession, typically by landing strikes in combination, or by increasing the damage of a single strike by landing a strike when your opponent is vulnerable. So, whereas you can think of the chin meter as a metric by which you know how much long-term damage it takes to put someone away, the stun meter is more of a short-term metric. You'll know, through repeated play sessions, since this doesn't change, you'll get a sense of how much short-term damage it takes to rock someone. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Basically, the chin is either the more you rock someone, the less it takes to put them away completely. And the stun meter governs how much short-term damage it takes to actually stun someone. So you have both these meters working in the background. You don't have dice rolls anymore. You don't have percentage chances anymore. You have linear meters that are determined by the amount of damage being sustained, essentially. Vulnerability. This one is huge, and you may have heard this word thrown around on the Operation Sports forums if you attend them. This is absolutely huge, and it's going to make for probably the biggest shift in gameplay feeling from UFC 2 to UFC 3. So, Geoff says, just like in real life, understanding when your opponent is vulnerable is incredibly important. Every time you perform an action, striking, moving, lunging, head movement, etc., you expose different parts of your body to increase vulnerability. So, Geoff says, just like in real life, understanding when your opponent is vulnerable is incredibly important. Every time you perform an action, striking, moving, lunging, head movement, etc., you expose different parts of your body to increase vulnerability. When a strike is landed on an opponent in a vulnerable region, the damage can be multiplied by up to 6 times. That's massive. That's massive. And, maybe Geoff said this, maybe he didn't. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I'll leave that up to you. But whenever new players pick up this game and they're experimenting and they're throwing crazy strikes, you're going to see a lot of fights ending with one player throwing like a head kick while another player starts to throw a head kick. So you're going to get like these highly damaging strikes intercepting the startup of other highly damaging strikes. And you're going to get catastrophic, probably hilarious results as outlined here. You're going to see damage spike up like 6 times the normal amount, depending upon the vulnerability in the mix. So he says, just like with knockdowns, there are multiple states of vulnerability. Standing still. When standing still, you're naturally more vulnerable on the open side of your stance, and are naturally more vulnerable on the side of your liver, the right side of your body. Landing a strike to the open side or the liver, and you'll do more damage. So basically, this means that stance switching actually matters a whole hell of a lot. Because first of all, you know, where can I hit my opponent that they're open? Like, can I position myself relative to my opponent that I'm hitting them on their open side? And if I'm using like a kicker or someone with like legit body punches, like, can I put myself in a stance relative to my opponent that I can land a liver shot, right? So you can actually stack these two, is what he's saying. You can land on the open side and you can land on the liver. And if you stack both of those together, you get very multiplied damage. Moving. When you move forward, you'll naturally make your body, head, and legs vulnerable to attacks. I guess that kind of goes without saying. Makes sense logically when you think about it. You have fighters, like, for instance, whenever people chase Jose Aldo down, they're moving forward, they're putting weight on their leg. He chops their leg down with one of his rear leg kicks, right? They're going to take increased damage if they're moving forward, putting weight on that leg. Side to side. Moving from side to side or throwing a side-moving attack will open up the side you're moving towards. Every strike you throw comes with some risk due to the way it opens up your body. The amount of vulnerability tied to a strike depends on the damage that strike causes. The bigger the reward for landing a strike, the higher the vulnerability risk. Example, throwing a punch with your rear hand leaves you exposed on the left side of your head as your body moves with the action. So when I first read this, it was a little difficult for me to parse out, and I see that Geoff reworded it. So it's a lot more clear than it used to be. And he added this great screenshot here that essentially shows you exactly what he's talking about. So you see TJ Dillashaw throwing what appears to be a short right hook. Well, as he's throwing that right hook, he's putting his body weight into it, into the punch, right? And as he's doing that, he's moving forward like this. So he's actually opening up his the other side of his face to Cody Garbrandt's incoming hook here. So you're going to see that with basically any strike that moves you to the side. Ducking. Any strike that ducks, example, body punches and overhands, carry extra vulnerability on the bottom of the chin, leaving you particularly susceptible to uppercuts and knees. If you recall earlier, whenever I first began this video, I talked about how, yes, there are 3 damage regions, the head, the body, and the legs. But oh, look at this. He's talking about vulnerability on the bottom of the chin, okay? So what this means is that not only are there 3 distinct damage regions, as there always were, but there are sub-regions on those regions themselves, right? So you saw that a little bit with the vulnerability to the liver. So yes, your body is vulnerable, but whoa, you're more vulnerable on the right side. So that's like a sub-region of damage. And if you're ducking, then the bottom of your chin is more exposed. And I believe he explains this later on in the breakdown here. But you can also expose different parts of your head also. Like if you're going forward, you're exposing like your forehead. If you're leaning to the left or the right, you're exposing your temples. So really cool. Kicks. Kicks and various jumping/spinning attacks have varying vulnerability that generally follows the movement of the fighter's head. So those doggone jumping switch kicks from UFC 2 that plagued pretty much everyone in the game. If you have a John Jones player ducking down to throw those kicks, that player is going to make himself more vulnerable to incoming strikes as he ducks down. It's no longer going to be this huge invincibility aura, surrounding the fighter and completely taking a crap on the risk versus reward aspect of the game. So awesome. Blocking. You are left vulnerable to the body anytime the arm on the inside of the body is raised, leaving the body exposed. So what I take this to mean is that you're in your fight stance, you're just walking around as normal. Let's say you're in the orthodox stance, you go to throw a jab. Well, now you're more exposed on the left side of your body than you would have otherwise been. So you're going to take a bit more damage from that vulnerability. Let's say you're moving forward with the jab. Well, not only are you going to take more damage for having your arm leave the side of your body, but you're also going to take that forward moving vulnerability damage now. So you got to think about all these dimensions of risk that you never had to consider in the other games. Legs. Anytime a step is being taken, the legs become vulnerable. This is amplified when the character is moving forward. So kind of like we went over earlier with the Jose Aldo example, if you're pressing forward, yes, you're going to take more damage to your legs, but this is amplified when you're moving in any direction, which is nice because the ability for fighters in UFC 2 to just lunge to the side with complete impunity was a little ridiculous, and the increased vulnerability of moving laterally as well as forward should prevent a lot of mindless movement spam. Geoff says, understanding vulnerability and predicting your opponent's attacks gives you an opportunity to finish the fight in a single well-timed strike, just like inside the octagon. So this all goes back to what he said before, that with the proper vulnerability stacking, you can have up to 6 times the standard level of damage incurred from the strike. So, love it. Next up, health recovery. Just like many other aspects of the game, the health recovery system has completely changed in UFC 3, giving each region its own defining characteristics. The head. Your opponent's head is typically the highest of all damage regions. However, the head health recovers faster than all other regions. It's important to understand that the health recovery of the head is non-linear, meaning it recovers faster the lower the current health is. There are 3 strategies to employ when finishing your opponent this way. Short-term strategy. Land unblocked strikes in quick succession, or time a strike based on your opponent's vulnerability to drive health down quickly, forcing a knockdown. The medium-term strategy. Maintain a steady assault on the head region to keep the health at a moderate level before timing a big attack to deplete their health meter. The long-term strategy. Chip away at their long-term health over multiple rounds until their health cannot regenerate to as high a value, making it easier to mount a significant attack. So what's really cool about all this, in my opinion, is that Geoff meticulously designed the game to accommodate each of these different strategies. You're not going to just flail away and whatever comes your way, as it did in UFC 2 with the game's massive reliance on RNG. You actually have 3 different strategies to play with and lots of leeway in between these to kind of, do it your own way. It's important to note that landing strikes when your opponent has low current health depletes more long-term health. So a slow and steady, well-timed assault can really pay off in later rounds. Very cool. I'm going to read that one more time. It's important to note that landing strikes when your opponent has low current health depletes more long-term health. So a slow, steady, well-timed assault can really pay off in later rounds. All 3 strategies are viable, and the successful fighter will typically employ a combination of all 3. So what I love about this is that it means that if you're completely dominating, outclassing your opponent, then you're going to have a much better chance to finish them, put them away. In UFC 2, especially in UFC 1, but that kind of goes without saying, you could completely dominate people. They can recover like insanely well and then land a lucky shot that comes out of nowhere that has no, coherence to it, rock you and put you into some kind of precarious position that you can't recover from. That shouldn't happen here. If they're going to put you away, they need to either, land lots of strikes on you in quick succession. They need to time something like really big on you, or they need to chip away at you over the long term, dominate you, and then put you away. So what all of this does is that it's going to raise the skill ceiling of the game to where if you're consistently doing damage, you're consistently landing clean, you're consistently avoiding damage, and consistently avoiding, exposing yourself to a great amount of risk, then you're going to come out on top. At least that's how it should work. The beta will tell us if that's true. Body. Body damage is usually not as high as the head. However, body damage does not regenerate as quickly. Strikes to the body also deplete short-term and long-term stamina. The lower the short-term stamina of your opponent, the more long-term stamina and health is depleted if you land a body strike. This means that the perfect time to land a body kick is immediately after you have successfully defended a flurry thrown by your opponent when they are low on stamina. So what we're seeing emerge here, even if you don't look at legs yet, which we'll get to, but if you only look at the head and the body, what you see are two distinct meta strategies that you can employ. With the head, you can aim to just put people away based on pure damage, pure beatdown, pure domination. With the body, although you can't damage spike the body as much, you can employ a more long-term strategy on it since the damage doesn't regenerate as quickly and the strikes sap away at long-term and short-term stamina. So you can say, hey, I want to put this guy away. I want to employ a Mike Tyson-esque strategy. I'm going to go to the head right away. I'm going to turn his lights out. Or you can say, you know what? I don't really care about turning his lights out right away. I'm going to chip away at his long-term and short-term stamina so that over the course of rounds, maybe around 3, then I'll start employing this medium-term strategy. I'll employ a steady assault on the head, Or you can just say, hey, I'm just going to whittle him down to where he can't defend anything. It's kind of up to you, but you can employ these different strategies based upon the damage regions and how they function. This is a lot different from UFC 2, where you could kind of mindlessly mix up head and body, and you had a more or less equal chance to put someone away with body strikes as you did with head strikes. In UFC 3, you'll be able to spike the head damage far easier than you'll be able to spike the body damage, but you have the trade-off of doing increased stamina drain to your opponents. And finally, and maybe my favorite, we come to the legs. Geoff says the leg damage is the lowest of the 3. However, leg health does not regenerate at all, making leg attacks the ultimate long-term strategy. If you catch someone in a vulnerable state, you will do big damage that will never heal. There is a risk to this though, as checked leg kicks deal back considerable damage. Checking 2 leg kicks in quick succession will cause a health event. Let me highlight that again for you a few times. Checking 2 leg kicks in quick succession will cause a health event to the kicker. As your leg health decreases, the amount of power you generate with your own attacks will decrease. So as long as you are not predictable with your leg kicks, they can be a great investment that can pay off in later rounds. As with everything, a balanced attack between head, body, and legs can be very effective. But if your opponent ignores one of the regions defensively, exploiting that can end the fight quickly. So I absolutely love this. And I did get to play around with this. This was tuned as such as described here at the last event that I attended. And what it means is, okay, you want to put someone away, like soon, like rapid fire, head. Okay. You want to chip away at their long-term stamina, kind of have options about what you want to do with them. Body, cool. Legs, it doesn't chip away at stamina. In UFC 2, the leg attacks chipped away at stamina. So did the body attacks. So it was kind of nebulous as to which one you're supposed to attack. And the low guard, blocked both of them, right? In UFC 3, you no longer get that stamina damage, but you get a damage region where there is no regeneration at all, right? And that's huge. And also what's huge is the fact that, where is it here? Yeah. As your leg health decreases, the amount of power you generate with your own attacks will decrease. So you can go against a power puncher, and instead of engaging them on the feet and trying to take them out with the head, you can just go to their legs for like the first 2 rounds. And then maybe in round 3, you invite a war so that now the guy that you're slugging it out with has nowhere near the initial amount of power that he once had. So you get a lot of flexibility with these different damage regions and how the health regenerates with each of these regions. Stamina system. This is a doozy. This is so much different than the first two games that it's almost hard to convey. Stamina system. The first thing to understand with the new stamina system is that the amount of damage a strike will deal is reduced greatly as the stamina of the striker is reduced. This means that the most effective way to strike is to throw a combination, wait until your stamina has fully regenerated, and throw another combination. This ensures you land maximum damage with each strike. I think something was edited out here, or maybe Geoff missed something. I don't think I'm going to be breaking any NDAs or laws against humanity if I reveal this. But what I remember seeing here before he says this means that the most effective way to strike is to throw a combination, wait until your stamina is fully regenerated, and throw another combination. I don't think that makes sense with the context of this statement. But what I remember being here before this is that he said that if you're throwing a true combination, then with each consecutive strike, your stamina will not go down, right? So if you throw jab, straight, left hook, then in UFC 2, your left hook, you'd be throwing your left hook with less stamina power behind it than your jab came out with, right? Jab, straight, left hook. Your jab would be doing max damage because you had max stamina. Your straight would be doing a little less than max damage. And then your hook would be doing less than both of those punches. You kind of had a diminishing return on your combination. In UFC 3, the way that Geoff at least intended to set it up, I don't know if it's going to remain this way, is that you throw the jab, straight, hook, and then that hook retains the power of your jab. Like, you retain the stamina that you started the combination with. So if you throw a combination and then let your stamina fully refill, this means that you're throwing each combination with the maximum amount of power that you possibly could, right? So if you throw like a three-piece combo and then you immediately spam out another three-piece combo, you're going to be throwing that second three-piece combo with a lower like set of stamina. Just a really cool touch, really subtle. Maybe they edited it out because it was too complicated to explain, which I understand. But yeah, maybe that's in there, maybe that's not. But I remember that being in there for sure. When your stamina is low, you're also more vulnerable. This means that not only do you do less damage with low stamina, but you also put yourself at higher risk to vulnerability when striking with low stamina. Every strike thrown costs you stamina. The lower your stamina when you strike, the more long-term stamina is drained. Strikes that land cost less stamina than strikes that miss. Strikes that are evaded by your opponent cost even more stamina. Let's take a moment to highlight this because this is really big. I felt in UFC 2 that missed strikes didn't drain near enough stamina, especially if you compare how the stamina drain was handled in Fight Night Champion. A Fight Night Champion, if I'm Mike Tyson and I'm inefficient with my strikes, if I'm trying to flurry you and I'm missing like 50% of my strikes, I'm going to gas and be like, I'm going to have the cardio of an old man in like 2 rounds, like no joke. Whereas in UFC 2, man, I could wail away. I could be hitting air like a large percentage of the time. And as long as my cardio stat was like high, it didn't really matter. The consequences of missing are going to be way more pronounced now, which is part and parcel with the freedom that we now have with moving strikes. It all just makes sense. You have the freedom to move and to land, but with that freedom, you have to be responsible. I think Spider-Man said something like that at some point. Stamina floor. The stamina floor is the lowest you can reduce your stamina to by throwing a certain type of strike. Each strike has a different stamina floor. So this concept I think people may misinterpret, but we'll go through it and then we'll come back to it. Straight punch. A straight punch has the highest stamina floor. If you only throw straight punches, you will only drain your stamina to a minimal level. If your stamina happens to be below that level, throwing straight punches will still allow your stamina to regenerate to that level. Keep in mind, this all means short-term stamina. You can spam to your heart's content with straight punches, and your short-term stamina will shoot back up to a designated floor, but you still will be draining your long-term stamina no matter what. So I just want to make clear, this mechanic only governs the short-term portion of the stamina. Hooks and uppercuts. These two strikes have a lower stamina floor than straights, but still won't allow your stamina to fully drain. So you can throw lots of straight punches, and you'll refill back up closer to your maximum stamina than you will with hooks and uppercuts. But if you keep throwing hooks and uppercuts, you still can't fully drain your stamina. All other strikes have no stamina floor. In other words, spinning back kicks, wheel kicks, flying knees, spinning back fists, etc. So throwing them in abundance can leave you fatigued and your vulnerability extremely high and your strikes extremely slow. As your long-term stamina depletes, the stamina floor for all strikes drops until they all eventually hit 0. This makes managing your long-term stamina incredibly important. So this last line, if you're just like spamming to your heart's content, then you can no longer rely on the stamina floor that you once could. But what do these stamina floors mean in the whole? Well, the way that I heard it explained to me by sources unknown is that this is a bit like a heart rate simulator. So a healthy, athletic UFC level fighter can throw lots and lots of straight punches without winding themselves too badly, right? You're not gonna take Joanna Jędrzejczyk and tell her, okay, throw 10 strikes, and then she throws 10 jabs and straights, and then she's like huffing and puffing. Like, that's not gonna happen. She can probably throw like 200 of those. Maybe that's an overstatement. Maybe like 100, and she'll be fine. So this simulates heart rate, right? So as your long-term stamina goes down, your ability to throw those flurries and maintain that stamina floor also goes down. So that's like the simulation of being winded throughout the fight. Like, your heart rate goes up. If your heart rate is accelerated for too long of a period of time, your ability to your ability to sustain output goes down concurrently. Now, the effect that I think this will also have is if you take a new player and put them against another new player, a lot of times those players will tend to kind of spam themselves out. And in UFC 2, they would throw like 7 to 10 strikes, and then they would be completely gassed like an old man, and they would have to wait for a long time before their stamina fully shot back up to full. This mechanic will allow new players to punch a bit more, or strike a bit more rather, without winding themselves completely like an old man, although it's still going to have long-term implications. So they're not going to be able to get away with this in the long term, and they're still going to be opening themselves up to a monstrous amount of vulnerability if they're not careful. So I wouldn't worry about this too much. I told Geoff that this might be alarming to some of you, but I don't think it'll be a big deal. Stamina regeneration between rounds. I absolutely love this. And this may be me. This may be me. I'm Conor McGregor now. This may be me entire. This may be me. This may be me. My words don't work anymore. This may be my favorite thing out of the entire Real Player Motion Tech Striking Deep Dive. I absolutely love this. It wasn't so much a feature in UFC 2. You could select Mark Hunt. Take him up against Cain Velasquez. You, as Mark Hunt, you land 75% of your strikes. You throw 50% less strikes than Cain Velasquez. Cain misses 70% of his strikes. He throws 50% more strikes than you do. In between rounds, what happens in UFC 2? Well, something very detrimental to the gameplay, in my opinion. Cain comes back with more stamina than you do. Like, how does that happen? Like, your input, your input has no effect on the game. Like, your ability to be efficient with your striking and with your energy has a negligible effect upon your state later in the fight, which is completely backwards. And this is something that Fight Night Champion really paved the way with, in my opinion. I loved that game for this. A poorly played Mike Tyson by round 3 could be gassed to like 60% and moving very slowly. An intelligently played Mike Tyson could go into the 10th round with upwards of 90% stamina. It all depended upon the player. And this is, simulating that. And Geoff, bold man that he is, believes that this system is actually superior to Fight Night Champions, so we shall see. He says, you'll be given a fixed amount of stamina in reserve at the beginning of the fight based on your endurance rating. When a round ends, you can draw up to 50% of that stamina to use for the next round. This means if you use too much stamina in the early rounds, you won't have enough stamina left in reserve to regenerate anything of significance for the later rounds. This makes stamina management much more critical in EA Sports UFC 3 as compared to its predecessors, and is a key factor to consider when building your strategy. So let's look at this one more time. You'll be given a fixed amount of stamina in reserve at the beginning of the fight based on your endurance rating. When a round ends, you could draw up to 50% of that stamina to use for the next round. So let's say you're Cain Velasquez again. You're gonna have a very big you're gonna have a very big reserve of stamina. You can think of this like a bucket to draw from. So Cain Velasquez has a very big bucket. But let's say you're fighting against a really inefficient Cain Velasquez. He goes absolutely ham in the first 2 rounds, trying to take you down, trying to take your head off, missing a lot of strikes, missing a lot of big hooks and kicks. So let's say in the first round, he draws up to, let's see, when a round ends, you can draw up to 50% of that stamina to use for the next round. Let's say he spams himself so hard in round 1 that he draws 50% of the stamina to use for the next round. Okay. In round 2, he spams again, uses the next 50%. By round 3, he will have used everything within that reserve, right? Which may not be a lot. Maybe he would have served himself much better by simply being efficient. No one's here saying that you can just like spam, and then be right back up to 100% by drawing 50% of the stamina. That's probably not how it's going to work out. It would be utter lunacy if that did happen. So I think Geoff's concept here, what he has in mind, is that like you're going to be in much better shape if you're an efficient fighter. Pick your shots more so than you are going to be spamming like really hard and then withdrawing 50%, because that might sound like a lot, but maybe it's 50% of 10 total stamina points. So then you're only recovering, 5 in the round, which is going to be far less than if you had just not exhausted, the 20 points of stamina that you exhausted in the round. So just keep that in mind. I think I covered this enough. But I love it. Thank you, Geoff. Stopping power. A new concept introduced in EA Sports UFC 3, which is vital in understanding the role of each strike in your arsenal, is the concept of stopping power. This is the ability of stopping an opponent mid-fight by landing and dealing damage with one strike of your own. The bigger the stopping power value, the later in the trajectory you can land and still shut down your opponent's attack. If 2 strikes land very close to each other in time, stopping power is nullified and a concept called damage muffling takes over. For this specific scenario, you can think of Carlos Condit versus Dan Hardy, where they both threw lead hooks at the same time, and Hardy's landed just a little bit later than Condit's, and so it was muffled, right? In this scenario, the first strike to land deals full damage. If 2 strikes land on the exact same frame, they both deal full damage, leaving the window open for double rocks or double knockdowns. Cue the hilarious videos sure to be incoming. On top of these baseline rules for stopping power, there are several exceptions specific to different strike types that are very important to understand. Any head kick or overhand punch to the head will always interrupt any strike your opponent is throwing and will always cause a stagger if landed clean and unblocked. So that's pretty huge. Head kick and overhand punch have interrupt priority over everything else. So you can use these like as specific utility strikes to interrupt people. A straight punch to the head will always interrupt a forward-moving strike. This is very big. I'm going to give a little bit of credit to Martial Mind for helping to get this implemented into one of the builds that we played. So the idea being, you stand your ground, right? Like, someone's coming at you, Vanderlei Silva style, with hooks, flurries of hooks. You don't have to counter back with a giant flurry of your own in order to hurt that guy. You can simply stand your ground, time your shots, pick it, and then launch a straight punch. And as long as you hit the person who's moving forward, you will stop them in their tracks. Now, that doesn't mean you'll cause a stagger. It doesn't mean you'll necessarily hurt them very badly, but you will stop them. A landing or retreating lead hook, a check hook, will always interrupt a forward-moving strike. So, same concept as the straight punch, but also applied to the retreating lead hook. Very cool. A round strike, hook, roundhouse, etc., thrown from your left side will always stop your opponent if they're moving toward your left side. So this is going to stop the lateral step and the lateral walk spammers. People might try to abuse the lateral walking since you can do that now while striking. Well, this will put a stop to it. It's just a built-in hard counter. A round strike thrown from your right side will always stop your opponent from your same thing, just different side. A front kick to the body will always interrupt your opponent's strikes or movement and will always push them backward. Front kicks are easier to evade with basic side steps and are easily caught with a successful low block. So just to elaborate on this a little bit, from my understanding, standard body kicks are going to take a bit tighter timing to actually catch so that you can, hit people or take them down. But the front kicks are going to have a pretty giant window that you can catch them. So this is very powerful, right? This concept that the front kick to the body will always interrupt your opponent's strikes or movement and will always push them backward. That's pretty powerful. But to counterbalance that, you can catch those kicks like more easily than you can catch other kicks, and you can punish easier. So we'll see. We'll see what beta reveals, but I think this should be balanced. Side kicks to the body will always interrupt your opponent's strikes or movement and will always push you back even if blocked. They are, however, very easy to evade and can be avoided with simple movement. So pretty much the same concept here, and I believe, could be wrong, but I believe these side kicks are even easier to evade just by walking side to side. Understanding the role of stopping power in the ways described above is vital in learning how to control your opponent's movements around the octagon. Using these simple rules, you can safely shut down overly aggressive opponents, create space using pushing strikes, and force a fleeing opponents back to the cage, pin them in, and attack them while they are in a position that nullifies several of their defensive options. So, this entire paragraph, you can basically equate to meaning, well, now you can control the octagon. You can implement ring generalship. In the last game, you really couldn't, because with every strike you had to stop, right? You couldn't move and strike, and all these various and sundry stopping power rules weren't implemented, right? So someone could walk to your side, right? They could like walk into your left hook, and it's like whatever, they just block it. All these strikes interact with your opponent's movements now. So every form of movement essentially has a hard counter, so you can implement ring generalship. Very cool stuff. Frame advantage. Now that you have a good understanding of the importance of stopping power and the role vulnerability plays in the damage system, it should be clear that landing a strike before your opponent can land theirs is a key to a successful attack. That's why EA Sports UFC 3 introduces an all-new framework that controls the amount of time that it takes for each of the following to occur when a strike is thrown. Execution frames are the number of frames from the time you press the button until it lands. Recovery frames, if you miss the strike before you can do one of the following: block, use head movement, lunge, move, or throw a follow-up strike. Recovery frames, if you land a strike before you can do one of the following. Oh, if you land a strike, right? If you miss a strike, or if you land a strike, block, use head movement, lunge, move, or throw a follow-up strike. Stun frames, when a strike lands into your block before you can do one of the following: block, use head movement, lunge, move, or throw a follow-up strike. Stun frames, when a strike lands unblocked before you can do one of the following: block, use head movement, lunge, move, or follow-up strike. Each of these frame values have been tuned to properly represent the risk and reward associated with throwing each technique. The results should feel intuitive, but to give a concrete example, I will illustrate what the system does for two very different strikes, a jab and a roundhouse to the head. So just a quick note on all this. The reason Geoff is listing out all of these specific states, all of these specific instances, is that he looked at the frames in each of these various states and consciously asked himself, what should I be able to do after I land an unblocked strike? What should the attacker be able to do? And what should the person who got hit be able to do? Same thing for blocking. What should the person who landed the strike be able to do after his strike is blocked? What should the person who blocked the attack be able to do after the strike is blocked? None of these questions were really asked for the previous two games. It's very organic. Sometimes you got good results that were convincing and fair. Sometimes you didn't. Sometimes it was completely unfair and you could just spam out crazy attacks to completely stifle someone, right? The risk versus reward wasn't there. Anyway, let's proceed. So he says, I will illustrate what the system does for two very different strikes, a jab and a roundhouse to the head. A jab is a very safe strike to throw, probably the safest strike in MMA. As such, the frame values have been tuned to make it a safe strike to throw. It is safe in the sense that the speed of the jab means it will never be intercepted and stopped by another strike thrown after it. Second, whether you land or miss the jab, you will always have time to block, slip, or otherwise defend yourself before a counter strike from your opponent is able to land. So cool. Whether you land or miss the jab, you'll always have time to block, slip, or otherwise defend yourself before a counter strike from your opponent is able to land. Both of these properties make the jab the safest one in the game, but as you would expect, it also deals the least amount of damage. Contrast that with the roundhouse kick to the head. This strike is unsafe, but deals a considerable amount of damage and has the highest stopping power in the game. The roundhouse is a very slow strike compared to the jab. That means that there are several strikes that could land before the roundhouse does, even if they begin after the roundhouse starts. Due to the stopping power of those strikes, if they land early enough, they can stop the roundhouse from completing. All these properties make the roundhouse a risky technique to throw. If you miss the roundhouse or the roundhouse is blocked, the recovery frames before you can block or slip is higher than the execution frames of some punches. This means that failing to land a roundhouse kick can put you in a state where you are both vulnerable and have no way of defending yourself. This makes the roundhouse an unsafe strike to throw. Each strike has different frame tuning values balanced against the damage it deals and the vulnerability it exposes you to. Anytime you get in a situation where you can perform an action before your opponent can, this is called being at a frame advantage, borrowed from fighting games. Understanding what can put you at a frame advantage and what can give your opponent a frame advantage will make you a better fighter. Pretty clear examples, I think. Like I said, just all this is planned out. It's not left up to chance. The flow of the game and the fairness of the game has been predetermined and consciously planned. Combinations. The frame tuning system set a solid baseline for strike timings, but combinations are a way to sidestep those rules and throw strikes faster than the frame tuning system would normally allow. The combination system in EA Sports UFC 3 has been completely rebuilt from the ground up. Gone are the generalized combo rules and combo multiplier from past titles, which many of you are going to love. In their place, we have built a much more authentic combination system that encourages more realistic combos be thrown at a more realistic pace. Each fighter has different sets of combinations based on the strikes they can throw and their skill and proficiency in various disciplines of martial arts. Some fighters also have unique combinations assigned only to them, making fighters in EA Sports UFC 3 much more unique and interesting to play with. The first step in choosing your fighter and learning their combos. Go into practice mode with your fighter, learn their combos through the in-game menus and practice them. Commit them to muscle memory. Combinations are much harder to throw in EA Sports UFC 3 due to the increased number of techniques made available in the control scheme, and practicing them in a safe environment is vital to success in real fights. The most efficient use of stamina and best way to maximize the potential damage dealt to your opponent is to throw your combinations from full stamina, okay, he does address it, and then allow your stamina to regenerate to its maximum again before starting another combination. Anything more aggressive than this will reduce the potential damage dealt for each strike in the combination. Some combinations can only be thrown when a particular strike in that combination misses, missed roundhouse to spinning back fist, for example. Other combinations can only be thrown when a particular strike lands. Get familiar with different combos, practice them, experiment with them in fights. There's a lot to explore, and adding new combinations to your arsenal can be a very rewarding experience. So, this is also quite huge. Probably, if I were to go out on a limb, aside from the stamina regeneration, maybe the second biggest, well, other changes are bigger. This is probably my second favorite change. So the idea here is that you have a roster of hundreds of fighters. In UFC 2, they can all throw the same combinations if they have the same base strikes in their movesets. Now you can have fighters with the same movesets, but they can have different combinations assigned to them. So what does a combination do? So a tuned combination in the game, and more will be revealed about this, but essentially different fighters have different specific combinations assigned to them. Does that mean that they can't throw like certain combinations at all? No. Well, if they don't have a specific combination assigned to them, they can still do like whatever they want to do for the most part. But if a combination is specifically assigned to them, if I am Stephen Thompson and I have like a wheel kick built into my combo, then it basically means that I can throw that wheel kick out faster in my combo string, right? Like, I don't know if this is a combo or not, but let's say that a Stephen Thompson combo is like, jab, straight, wheel kick. Well, Stephen Thompson will be able to throw that specific combination faster than Nick Diaz could, for example. Like, you can build it to where the frames, the speed of the combinations work out better. You get more of a frame advantage from, building certain strings into combos. And it's going to make you have to go into practice mode and truly understand the fighter that you're dealing with. You're not going to be able to just look at their stats and play them slightly differently. You're really going to have to learn not only their moves, not only their stats and their perks, but you're going to have to learn each fighter's unique combinations. You're going to have to know what leaves you at a frame advantage and what leaves you at a frame disadvantage. So, very cool. When I first heard about this concept, I thought it might strip away too much freedom, but after playing around with it a little bit, I no longer believe that. I think it's just going to lend more authenticity, more of a learning curve to each fighter, which I welcome. Range management. Oh, I love this also. Probably my third favorite thing. In EA Sports UFC 3, there is a new emphasis on movement thanks to the real player motion tech. Every action you perform can be done while standing or moving. This opens up a whole new dimension of strategy, and understanding range management is critical to being successful with these new strategies. There are 5 ranges to be aware of in this game: elbow range, punch range, kick range, step kicking range, out of range. As the name would suggest, elbow range is the distance at which you can successfully land a standing elbow on your opponent. The same is true for a punch or a kick. I thought this was Kenny Florian at first. I don't think it is. The same is true for a punch or a kick. Step kick range is the distance at which you can throw a kick with a forward stepping motion. Out of range is the distance at which you cannot land any strike and your opponent is safe. Kind of obvious, but I'm glad he put it in there anyway, just to clear up any hint of confusion. Each strike in the game has a range from which it can land. Typically, the forward-moving version of the strike extends the range of the strike by 1, and the backwards-moving version of the strike reduces its range by 1. Forward-moving strikes generally have more execution frames and thus take longer to land than their standing counterparts. In addition, each strike has an ideal distance where if landed from this distance, it will deal maximum damage. Elbows, hooks, and uppercuts are best thrown at closer range and deal more damage at closer range. Straight punches, straight kicks, and round kicks generally deal the most damage close to the end of their range. Landing them too close to your opponent will deal considerably less damage. So, this is really friggin' cool, in my opinion, and it's going to open up the doors for shorter fighters to excel, and it's going to make picking long-reach fighters like John Jones and Alexander Gustafsson more of a question of trade-offs rather than an absolute advantage. So, if I pick Johnny Bones and I'm in my punch range, which is quite long, then good. You know, I can throw jabs and straights and I'm going to deal max damage. If I'm going up against a Cormier player who starts crowding me into his hook range, that's going to probably be my elbow range. So in order to do max damage, I'm going to want to throw elbows in close. If I keep trying to trade with him, like hook for hook, I'm going to get blown up, and rightly so. I think this is going to be a giant learning curve for a lot of players, because this is something that people have never had to worry about in the last 2 games, like at all. It's just like pick a tall fighter, abuse the range. If someone gets in close, so what? Throw hooks, you're good. Not going to be like that anymore. It's going to be a bit closer. Again, I know I bring this game up a lot, but Fight Night Champion, they did it really well. But I actually think that it's going to be tuned better in this game, because whereas Fight Night Champion relied largely on physics-based calculations, this is all going to be occurring in UFC 3 through a conscious design decision. Landing straight punches and kicks will maintain or create distance due to the pushing nature of the strike. Hooks, uppercuts, and round kicks do not share this property, and throwing them will allow your opponent to close distance on you. So, again, very cool. Think Lyoto Machida. Landing straight punches and kicks will maintain or create distance due to the pushing nature of the strike. Someone like Lyoto, someone like Stephen Thompson, they're trying to stay on the end of their strikes. They're trying to get away from you for a large percentage of the fight, maybe bait you in, but they don't want you closing distance on them unexpectedly. So you're going to be able to land straight punches and kicks to maintain distance. Cool. Hooks, uppercuts, and round kicks do not share this property, and throwing them will allow your opponent to close distance on you. A front kick to the body or spinning side kick to the body could get converted into a head kick at the proper range if the opponent ducks down into it, either by slipping or shooting for a takedown. This can lead to devastating damage dealt due to the vulnerability that fighter is exposed to. So, essentially, the Uriah Hall versus Gegard Mousasi KO exchange, where Gegard ducked down a little bit, and Uriah's spinning body kick became a spinning back head kick. That can happen in this game. It can happen with other strikes also. One final way in which range comes into play is when comparing fighters with long reach versus short reach. Obviously, the longer fighter has a bigger range for their strikes as compared to that of the shorter reach fighter. In order to balance this out, we have made the range requirements to hit maximum damage much stricter for the long reach fighter than the short reach fighter. This variance is even more pronounced on short range strikes, where the shorter fighter will naturally shine. This means that even though they can both achieve maximum damage, it is much more difficult to do with the longer reach fighter. So I really like this, and I think it adds another layer of authenticity to the game. So we often hear commentators criticizing naturally long fighters, like Stefan Struve, for instance, for not fighting tall. Some fighters do fight tall. John Jones is a good example of someone who does do that very well. He keeps his range. Whenever fighters get in close to him, he uses his elbows. He's very good about that. You're going to have to do the same thing as the player. If you choose a tall fighter, you're going to have to be a little more stringent about where you throw your hooks, where you throw your uppercuts. You need to be right in that sweet spot. Someone like Cormier, he's going to have more leeway, right? He can have a bigger range of motion, I guess like a bigger spatial range, where his hooks and his uppercuts will be doing maximum amount of damage. So it all comes back to know your fighter. If you're a shorter guy, you have more freedom to throw shorter strikes. If you're a longer guy, you have a bit less freedom to just go completely ham with their strikes and still have them do anything substantial. In addition, we have added an execution frame penalty to the longer fighter to simulate the fact that their longer limbs take more time to reach their target. The hope is that this balances out tall fighters and short fighters, making them both competitive if used the right way. As always, the best way to understand this is to go into practice mode and experiment with various techniques. So, another cool touch here, slight execution frame penalty to the taller fighter. I think these were all needed adjustments to make the short versus tall fighter matchup more balanced and authentic. I'm sure you guys will give your feedback after you play the beta, and this is something that does need to be looked at. It's very important element of making sure that fights are fair and fun. Defense. The defensive options and strategies have completely changed in EA Sports UFC 3, and understanding your defensive options is another big key to success. The biggest shock to returning players will likely be that parries are gone. The biggest shock or the biggest pleasure? For me, it's one of the biggest pleasures of this entire defense overhaul. I'll let that sink in for a moment. I will too. Okay, now that you're over it, let's focus on the defensive options. Your first line of defense is blocking. Like in the previous game, there is a high block and a low block. High block protects your head, low block protects your body and legs. The controls for blocking have changed though, and this is important to know before going into your first fight. High block is now the right trigger, and low block is the right and left triggers pressed at the same time. Depending on which strike is landed, the high block may protect you from all the damage, or it may allow a baseline percentage of that strike's damage to bleed through. For example, head kicks have considerable bleed through, whereas jabs have none. In addition to bleed through, the high block can be broken down quite aggressively. The block can be broken down by throwing your strikes in different left-right patterns. Alternating between round and straight strikes will eventually break down the block, as the defensive fighter is unable to continue to track the strike fast enough until one eventually sneaks through and the block is broken. Experiment with different patterns and see what works best for you, but understand that blocking will only get you so far. Eventually your block will be broken, and you will eventually want to evade a strike before it gets to that point. So this is a bit of a nerf to the turtling that went on in the first two games. A rightful one and an authentic one. If you guys want to get like a good idea, I think, for the inspiration for this mechanic, go look up Fedor Emelianenko versus Gary Goodridge. There should be like GIFs of it all over the place. And yes, I said GIF and not GIF. Fight me. But Fedor throws like a whole bunch of hooks at Gary Goodridge. And then when Goodridge's hands go up to protect the sides of his head, Fedor sneaks in some uppercuts like right up the middle. Because that's not where Goodridge is blocking anymore. And you'll be able to do that same sort of thing here. From my understanding also, and I need to play around with it more, you'll also be able to kind of alternate left, like round strikes and then straight strikes and back and forth. But you will be able to whittle down someone just holding the high block like way more easily than you could in the prior games. So, goodbye turtle meta, goodbye parry meta, farewell, I will not miss you. Slipping. A forward slip causes your fighter to duck. While you're in forward slip evasion frames, you'll evade left and right round attacks and any straight attack. You also mitigate damage from any body attack due to the compression of your body and the protection offered by your arms. A slip to the left or right will lean your fighter in that direction. Side slips will evade all straight arc strikes and upward arcing strikes aimed at the head. The final slip direction is the back slip. This slip evades all strikes to the head, but only if the strike would land at the edge of its strike range. This means that if a jab was thrown from punch range, a back slip would evade the jab because the head is moved from punching range to kicking range for the duration of the evasion frames. However, if a jab is thrown from elbow range, a back slip won't work. Similarly, if a forward moving jab were thrown from punching range, a back slip would fail to evade because of the extra range of the forward moving jab covers. So Geoff here is just trying to hammer home the point. Like, yes, the back slip is going to be pretty good in terms of like evading all strikes to the head, but it's range dependent. So you can't just like sit in one spot and lean backward like you can in UFC 2. You can't do the old lean back dance move like Biggie Smalls. I think that's who created that. Don't judge me if I'm wrong. But you can't do that anymore. You can't just lean back and just let all the strikes thrown at you blow by you, like you're some kind of like you're Neo in the Matrix anymore. Won't work. It's also worth noting that some striking techniques contain evasive frames. Once you effectively evade a strike, you will have a window where you are guaranteed your opponent will not be able to land a strike. This is your opportunity to counter. While countering, your opponent's vulnerability is increased, so you will deal more damage if you hit them in a vulnerable region. Lunges. The final defensive mechanic I like to cover are lunges. Lunges work similar to slips in that they can evade strikes or mitigate damage, but they cost stamina and have a different set of evasive properties. There are 3 types of lunges: basic, advanced, and signature. Basic lunges performed by flicking the left stick. Basic forward lunges move you forward 1 strike range very quickly and have no evasive properties. Basic back lunges move you back 1 strike range very quickly and have similar evasive properties to the back slip. Basic left and right lunges have the same evasive properties as left and right slips, but are also able to avoid straight trajectory body strikes. They do not evade leg kicks. Advanced lunges, performed by holding L1 and flicking the right stick. The right stick, mind you, not the left stick. An advanced forward lunge moves you forward 2 striking ranges and has no evasive properties. An advanced back lunge moves you 2 striking ranges backwards at the cost of increased stamina drain. Advanced left and right lunges evade everything the basic left and right lunges do, but they will also evade any round arc attack coming from the opposite side that you're lunging to. This is at the cost of increased vulnerability and stamina drain. This is the ideal lunge to use to circle out off the cage when you have your back against it. Signature lunges, and these are brand spanking new. Performed by holding L1 and flicking the left stick. Not all fighters have signature lunges. For those fighters that do have them, and you can use your imagination, each fighter's signature lunge will behave differently from those of other fighters. There are typically signature strike combinations that chain out of these lunges as well. Dominic Cruz has the most diverse set of signature lunges, but I will leave it as an exercise for the reader to discover who has signature lunges and how to use them. Thank all you guys for listening to this extremely long breakdown. I know it must have taken a lot of patience to get through, but if you made it all the way, then major props to you. And also major props to the EA UFC 3 development team. I think they're going to have a hit on their hands. I really hope that it is. I hope that it's a hit with people. I hope that people embrace the complexity, because I know I am. And that's it. Zombie Rommel out. Have a good one, guys.